Good. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me and thank you so much for taking the time to join with us. I'm really, really excited for our team to be bringing this casual Q&A chat for all of you. And this is where we're going to get really real and talk about layoffs in product. And the tech layoffs have been a constant theme this year for several months. And we just don't talk about it enough. And so I'm really, really excited to welcome our guest, Carey Flack. She is a product manager at Adobe, a growth product manager at Adobe. And we are going to talk about all things layoffs in tech and product. How do you bounce back from it? How do you really thrive? How do you find your center? And how do you find the courage to continue to go on and hear from Carey on her journey? So just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm Bosky. I'm the founder of PM Dojo. And before we get started, just a few things. This is your time to participate. This is really a safe space. Make sure that you put in your questions on chat. If you want to ask anything, join us. And if there's anything that resonates with you, share it on social. I'm sure that there are others who would benefit from some of the learnings from our Q&A today who were not able to make it to the event. The other thing is, again, as I mentioned, engage on the chat window, ask your questions, and keep up on the social and subscribe on our PM Dojo website if you want to be the first ones to know about such events. We are bringing some amazing events in the next few weeks as well. So with that, let's move on to the next slide, please. Awesome. So in terms of the agenda, really simple. We will be introducing you to Carey. She's an amazing, amazing human being, and we'll talk about how Carey and I got to know each other as well. And that was, I think, the good part of the layoffs that happened. Otherwise, I don't think I would have gotten to know her. And we'll keep a super casual time over the next few minutes to do like a Q&A. We've received several questions from many of you who have registered for the event, and we'll hear from Carey. And of course, if there are any other questions towards the end of the event, happy to take those through as well. So just a little about PM Dojo for those of you who may not know us. For those of you who are joining us again, welcome again. So PM Dojo is a global and a learning community that really fosters the feeling of learning and growing throughout your career. We support people who are interested in product, getting into product, and also people who are already in product career to really grow in their career. Our community has members from all over the world, and we are growing every single day. And it makes my heart really, really happy to see how much we've grown over the last 2.5 years. Thanks to all the amazing community members. Just a little bit about our mission. PM Dojo, I started PM Dojo in 2019 with a single desire to really help make the careers in product more equal, accessible, diverse, and inclusive. These words are something that it really means a lot to me, even before the word inclusivity and accessibility had become buzzwords in the industry. These were some things that I really treated them very seriously because I was always that one person who either looked different or sounded different in the tech industry for over 2 decades. And this is something that we do. We really help people across all different intersectionalities and diverse backgrounds, both visible as well as invisible, to really succeed in the tech world without experience and to thrive in the career. And how do we help our community? Of course, we run free community events like what we are having today and what we had in the past. And a lot of those events are going to be coming in the future as well. Make sure to subscribe on our website. And also we have our very signature programs, which is the Product Accelerator, really unique programs that help you learn, but also get you that industry experience so that you can find your first break in a product role. So if you are someone who's wanting to grow as a product manager or a product designer, UX researcher, or a software developer, feel free to join us in our next cohort or reach out if you have any questions. So with that, let's get started on today's event. So let's meet our speaker, Carey. I don't have words to describe Carey. When all of those layoffs were happening earlier this year, I had opened up my calendar over a course of 2 or 3 weeks to help out people answer any questions, review resumes, get them prepared, maybe for their next interview. And Carey booked a time and we got talking, and I just loved her tenacity, her persistence, and a very different outlook that she had when she actually faced a layoff in her career, and how she kind of navigated that. And the next few months, I came to know that she actually joined Adobe, a big tech company, as a growth product manager. I know. So just a little bit about Carey. I'm sure that Carey, I will not be able to do justice to your intro, but Carey is an e-commerce product manager, a growth product manager, several years of experience. She has launched some amazing products at a lot of these companies that you would have heard of: Drip, Tailwind, Tasty, BuzzFeed. And she's currently a growth product manager at Adobe. So with that, let's get started. Carey, anything you want to share, something that I might have missed in your intro?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that when the pandemic first hit, I actually took a short stint in user experience research as well. So a little bit of a career pivot, and then I pivoted back into product. And we'll talk about that more too, about how the journey of careers go. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just check with my team. Someone's asking, is there audio with this? I am expecting the audio to be working.
yeah, let us know in the chat if you can hear us. Seems like that came from YouTube.
Yes. Let's kind of just make sure that the audio is working, and then we will.
Oh,
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So let's get started. Let's take a look at some of the questions that have come for you, Carey. Is there a question that we can maybe pop on the chat window that might have come from the team? Otherwise, I can open up and take a look as well.
I know one question was about how I felt when I found out about my layoff, kind of my first reactions.
Yes. So let me, I'm just going to open up all of those questions from here. But yeah, Carey, if you want to get started on that, that would be awesome. So yeah,
Okay,
can you tell us about what you felt when you were told your role, sorry, Bernie, Carey, your role is no longer there in our company?
yeah. So for context, I was at the company for about a year and a half. And when I had gotten laid off, as you mentioned, I got laid off last May. That felt like at the height of the layoffs. Across the world, 100,000 other people had gotten laid off across various companies in tech. And I felt kind of, I guess, blindsided at first. Just being new in your career, you don't expect those things to happen. But right after, I started applying for roles, maybe a few days after I got my bearings, and there were also hiring freezes everywhere. So it was honestly a difficult time, a really scary time. And I was surprised at my layoff because I did really well at my company. I was one of 4 people across 120 people that got a Relationships Matter award. My team
Mm.
was doing really well, but sometimes economic circumstances are just out of our control. And so the way I handled it, I'd say it was in a pretty positive manner out of just sheer survival. Like, I've got to make it through this. I've got to find my next role. But I think staying positive also helped me find a way out of this situation. My goal was to take this like L, this like really bad situation, and somehow make it a win, and then also chart a new path for myself that was greater than before. And as I mentioned in the middle of my own product career, I did a stint in UX research, and at first I kind of saw that as kind of a loss too, like, oh no, I'm not in my field right now. But I also used that moment to upskill, to learn something that most PMs actually struggle with, which is digging in data and finding story through the noise. So I'd say my past experience helped, but the being laid off is definitely a new experience, that I just kind of had to get through. So
Thank you for sharing that, Carey. Tell me a little bit, are you a positive person just in general, or what made you have a positive outlook during that hard time versus did you complain? Did you rant? Did you write a post somewhere on social media complaining or expressing your feelings? Or did you maybe write it in your journal? Like, can you walk me through like
Mhm.
how did you how did you manage the hurt, anger, frustration, feeling that, somewhere the trust was broken, right? With being blindsided. Like, walk us through that a little bit,
Yeah,
if you
honestly,
want to.
yeah, no, so I saw people have all kinds of different reactions, not only in my company, but just, on LinkedIn. It was a really active time. And I think every reaction is fair. Mine
Yeah.
just happened to be that it didn't really, really hit me until my severance ran out. And so the first month I felt, yes, sad, but not really like frustrated or angry, more of just like, oh gosh, what am I gonna do? Like, internally, how am I gonna make sure my bills are paid and things like that. And I did, vent to friends, and I did talk to my family, and I did like hang out with my twin sister for a week after, and kind of just like, lay on our couch and kind of be kind of sad. We binge TV. It was great, but it was also easy to process when I had so much support. And I did that instead of like, I guess, venting as much on LinkedIn or in my exit interviews, venting. There were positives, there were negatives, but in the end, I'm grateful for the experience. And I wanted to leave on a good note, regardless of how unfair like the layoff felt. So
Thank you for sharing that. I think you're absolutely, I agree with what you said, right? Like every reaction and feeling is justified. I mean, when you are at that side of things where you're experiencing that, nothing seems fair. And I think everyone has a different way of handling it. You handled it in your own way, and that had its benefits, and probably also maybe had some other repercussions as well, right? Mentally, and I think for your own good. Um, let's move on to I think the next question that we received, and that was, what made you so openly talk about your layoff? Because you were pretty vocal about it, both in terms of for asking for help and also I think openly talking about your journey post layoff, right? So again, tell me a little bit about what made you do this, what motivated you to do this. Were you scared? Were you nervous? How did you kind of cope with that? And yeah, what made you kind of do this?
yeah, so after my layoff, I actually went to the Black Product Managers Conference in San Francisco. It's a great
Mm,
conference. Recommend it. I booked that flight on a whim because I wanted to find support. I wanted to like ignite my fire again after a layoff. And at one of the events, it was mentioned how often we only share our highlights on LinkedIn, and how that sends an inaccurate message about like how careers go for almost everybody.
yeah.
Careers go through highs and lows, and everything isn't so linear. One of my former directors at BuzzFeed, I don't know if you've seen the BuzzFeed logo, it kind of goes like that. It's like an arrow.
Yeah.
And they mentioned like that's like the perfect description of a career. Things aren't so linear and straight. Our direct careers go in all kinds of directions. And honestly, like it was a moment of vulnerability. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I knew when I heard that I didn't want to send that kind of like message that it's all perfect and it's all good. I found a job, no worries. Like there's so much that happens in
Yeah.
between finding out about a layoff and then getting your job. And so I definitely had moments where I felt like a little embarrassed to share, but in the end, I got so much interaction. So many people wanted to hire me because they saw my posts, which felt shocking. Like in my head, that doesn't make sense. But I think it's because more people can relate to being laid off or having to do a career pivot than like having a perfect career. And
Absolutely.
layoffs happen to good people all the time. And so it's a good opportunity to like pick up new talent. So that's also a great way to think of it too. Like, you're still a great like candidate, and talk about your journey, and don't let the shame like override the fact that you're still like an amazing PM. So
Absolutely. No, that is so important, Carrie. You know, it's about how I think you narrate your story and how did you overcome that painful and unfortunate event for no fault of yours. And I think something that we tend to forget, I've obviously done that numerous times in my career, that the person at the other end who is hiring, at the end of the day, we are dealing with humans and not robots. And
yeah,
so that story of personal downfall and triumph is
yep,
something that I think we all can connect with. And I think that also shows that resiliency and tenacity and perseverance in candidates. And as a hiring manager, I know that I get drawn to those candidates who can actually talk about overcoming those challenges. And life is not rosy. Life is not behind every glamorous LinkedIn profile. There is a messy individual who is trying to make life work, right? Not all of us have all of the privileges. No,
exactly. 100% like
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. I'll take a question from the audience. Below, really sorry to hear that you were laid off yesterday. I'm really sorry. If we can ever support you, please don't forget to reach out. So they are asking, what is your outlook on the market overall with respect to growth teams? Do you feel that companies are still prioritizing growth product teams?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be fair, this is my first growth role. Like I said, I've done UX research before, but never a full product role that really was centered on research. What I know that's happening in the space, I know there are still some hiring freezes, but I know that people are really still hiring as well, and pushing to have money allotments to bring on people who are interested in growth. And the great thing about growth is that it's a high impact role. You get to kind of prove and show your impact um, pretty quickly. And so I've got my fingers crossed that you'll be able to find a growth role. And feel free to reach out if you want to chat as well.
Thank you. And I think just to add to what you're saying, Carrie, at times like this, I've gone through a lot of these, probably four or five in my career so far. A war, economic crisis, financial crisis, housing crisis, a whole bunch of these things. And when times are like this, yes, there are layoffs and hiring freezes, but this also forces companies to reinvent.
Yeah.
And when they have to reinvent, because you have to do more with less, you have to find new ways of doing things, both internally from your processes standpoint as well as from your product standpoint. And innovation, invention is the mother of necessity, right? Like when times are tough, you have to force yourself to find ways. And I think this is where product managers, growth thinking, and having that growth kind of a way of expanding and growing your product can come in really handy. And so a lot of these skills, like maybe they're not going to be hiring as a growth PM, perhaps, but then if you are able to show that and bring that experience and skill set, you will be able to really be someone who can really stand out, because these are the times when companies are going to need those kind of skill sets, because we will have to accelerate in times of all of these constraints. So absolutely agree with what Carrie was talking about. And again, if there's anything that we can help you with, definitely please reach out. Um, the other question that I have for you is, what advice would you give to someone who is going through a layoff, or who has been laid off, or who might be feeling like, gee, my job might be on the line? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so I have a few pieces of advice. A lot of it stemming from the LinkedIn post I made. I think the first thing one needs after a layoff is a vision or a mission. So know what you're looking for in your next role and stick to that. It's really easy to feel desperate after a layoff, to feel like I should just take the first job that comes my way, but really think about what you want. Do you want to be at a more stable company? Do you want to learn a new skill, like growth or onboarding? Do you want to work in a new space, get better pay? Just kind of think about what you were looking for. I know someone here mentioned remote work, so that might be something that's important to you as well. Another thing is to apply wisely. There's a phrase called spray and pray, where you just kind of apply to like 50 jobs. And what I would recommend is actually looking for places where you have an in. So a warm referral, a recruiter that's reached out to you, a connection that's willing to chat. That is what builds your morale because then you can kind of move forward in the process. Um, I'd also recommend checking all avenues. I used LinkedIn. There's also Indeed and other platforms. I am part of the Black Product Managers Network, Natives in Technology and Products by Women. And all of those communities have Slack channels and job boards. And so I would recommend like looking into those kinds of communities too. And I even did like Twitter searches. People would post tweets about jobs that they were hiring for and that they were open to you DMing. And I think when there's a call out like that, it's great to respond. And then a few other things. Taking breaks is really important. Job hunting is a full time job and should be treated as such. And so, as best I could, I took weekends off. I tried to rest. I worked out, hung out with friends, did other things, and even took like side gigs to kind of just bring in some money during that time, which really helped. Um, and then I think on my post, this was the more controversial advice, but my advice was, and Bosky, let me know what you think. For me, knowing when to stop applying was really important, mostly because the product management interview prep is so intense and requires so much prep. Like you can easily do 20 hours of prep for like, a Google role or another big opportunity. You want to be able to like move along the
Yeah.
process. And if you start to feel like, I'm not liking what I have on my plate, like what opportunities I have, you can start applying again. But then lastly, let your people support you, therapist, friends, partner, and it could take longer than you think. Um, and that's okay. Just kind of keep going. And once again, Bosky, you had an open call saying like, I'm willing to talk to anybody. And so many people don't take that opportunity to chat with someone. And it's great to chat with someone who's like not a recruiter or not trying to hire you or something. And so I recommend taking help anywhere you can. It makes such a big difference. It lifted such a weight off of me when I talked to you.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you. No, I feel honored. And I think something that you did different that made me remember you. I talked with over 200 people during those 3 weeks that I just like stopped everything at my end that I just opened my calendar for like 6 hours or so every single day that I was doing this. Um, but something that stood out, you were one of the very few people who, after having a chat, actually sent a thank you note and call me old school.
I
but
am too.
but but I think receiving that, just I think it made me more invested, right? To kind of keep following your journey. Otherwise, it would have been just one of those transactional calls. And I think that is the big difference between, I think, the so-called networking that I think a lot of us have fallen the trap into. Like, okay, we'll just kind of start reaching out to people and actually building relationship. And there is a big difference between network and all of those contacts that we might have on LinkedIn versus actual people who might go and do more for you, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think you would have said yes to coming to our event had we not had that relationship. I don't think I would have been invested in following you along, right? And just kind of being interested in your journey because I saw something in you and you actually closed the loop. And I think that is really important. And something that you said earlier, Carey, 100%, knowing when to stop. Unfortunately, the product interviews can go for weeks. 7, 8 rounds is the norm, irrespective of where you are in your career journey, right? Whether you're entry, whether you're senior, and it can take a toll. Um, Along the way, we are bound to get rejections as well from other companies, and every single step, right, kind of hurts our morale. Sometimes, even when an interview is going well, we might think the interview kind of bombed and it really sucked, but maybe for the company it has gone really well and they may want to move you along. But it is also very lengthy in between the rounds. And from my own story, I was interviewing and interviewing and interviewing at one point in time, and I got through one of those big tech companies in the last round where I was invited to their office, but I was so exhausted. I did not know when to stop. I actually passed out. In my
Oh,
final round, I passed out. And of course, I didn't get the job. But it is crazy. I mean, there are these crazy horrid stories. I have someone who said they were so exhausted, they mixed up the time for the interview and never showed up and they joined
crazy.
1 hour. Like all of these things happen. And so really, really, like really useful advice. Like know when to stop. It's okay to take a break and then continue, because it's not just about getting your interview. You have to do well. So it
Do
is, you have to sustain and thrive. And then after that, when you get the job, you will still have to thrive. Like it doesn't end at just getting the job, right? So
exactly.
absolutely agree with that. Um,
100%.
I,
I wanted to add one thing you said. You talked about building those relationships and going beyond the transactional chats and like just interviews. One thing I did was post my Calendly on LinkedIn and tell people, book time, like let's chat. If you're a mentor and have advice, let's chat. If you have a company you love but y'all aren't hiring, let's chat. If you are hiring, let's chat. Like you never know what those relationships could be later,
absolutely.
how we could like help each other. But it also just like keeps you busy and keeps the energy flowing of like the job hunt, because it's easy for it to feel like stale and stagnant. So
Absolutely.
that's another piece of advice.
Thank you. Thank you. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. The second question is, in all of this, you were able to snag 4 offers.
Mhm.
Yeah. What made you choose the final one, the Adobe one? What were the variables that you were using in order to decide what is the right fit for you?
Yeah, it came down to what I wanted. So the first was I wanted a stable company. I'd spent years at startups and I love startups. It's actually, I recommend a lot of people start there, and go back eventually. I want to, but in this economic time, a stable company was really important. And VC funding is drying up, and
Yeah.
startups are struggling. So first, a stable company. I wanted a mentorship opportunity in my role. I wanted to work under and with experienced PMs. I wanted a research driven role because I already knew I loved UX and that was my like skill and superpower as a PM. And I also wanted to learn new skills or have opportunities where I could really level up my personal toolkit as a PM. So the factors that were less important were seniority and pay. Some roles said senior PM, some said PM, some paid more than the role I chose. And so those factors weren't as important for me. I had 2 full-time offers and 2 contract offers. And I chose Adobe, which is actually a contract role that has a pathway to full time, to offer myself career stability that a startup often can't. Outside of work, I'm also really interested in the intersection of technology and culture, like you, Bosky. And I knew that an international growth role would suit me well. But
Yeah.
not only that, it's like cool, like learning international strategy and being able to like say I have done that is going to help me in my career later. And lastly, I just wanted to be in an environment where I could really learn. And so Adobe offered that. And those were kind of the factors I thought about the most.
Thank you. So I think, to summarize some of the things, and I wish I was as smart as you back in my younger days. I made such horrible choices, and some of the times when I said yes to a role only to realize that it wasn't a good fit because naively I was choosing the title. And I also know, even these days when I talk to people, even in PM Dojo, when I'm kind of mentoring folks, I think it is so easy to get sucked into the glamour of a title,
Yeah.
because, of course, who wouldn't want to climb up in the ladder? But sometimes I think it's really important to think about what are some of the other things that we're looking for, because if those things are not giving you and filling your cup, a title is not going to be able to fill your cup for too long, and you're going to end up back in that square one space. So kudos to you, Carey, for thinking through like this. Like amazing, amazing, amazing. Um, One question out here. It's interesting. I have my perspective, but I'd love to hear your perspective on this, Carey. And that is, what advice would you give to someone to reduce the risk of being laid off in a market like we are right now?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. I know one piece of advice I heard that was really interesting and I think great is like not that we're all coasting, but like, this is not the time to coast. This is the time to be, and maybe Bosky, you said it. I can't remember between all my chats and conferences, but this is the time to work hard and show your impact and like put yourself out there in the workplace as an introvert also. Like I'm saying this. Um, Another thing is, we can't really control the economic environment, but keeping close relationships with our managers and our skip levels is really important. I chat with my directors on a regular basis and I share with them exactly what my impact is, even in these first few weeks. And they remember those things when they go into these more difficult meetings about money
Yep.
and, quarterly planning. And then the last thing is it's not really about reducing the risk of being laid off, but reducing the personal risk. When you start seeing the writing on the wall, if you're at a job, start applying. Sometimes that's an acquisition. Sometimes that's numbers that aren't looking good, an EBITDA that's not looking good, um, product market fit struggles. Always be interviewing, but especially in a time like this, I've seen people get spared in a layoff and feel good, but then a second round comes. So if you even get spared in a first round of layoffs, go start applying. Like that's what I would say for sure.
Thank you. 100% agree with that. I think something that I learned very hard way is to trust your instincts. You will start getting signals. You will start seeing things
Yeah.
happen in slightly different ways. Maybe there are lots of executive meetings suddenly happening. Maybe the nature of your all hands meetings will change when certain things are happening. Maybe companies will start uh, telling extra positive news and outlook about the company, because of course, as leaders, they are not wanting panic, right? For as much of transparency that we want, I think you also have to control, right? Like you can't just say, like, as parents, we wouldn't tell our children, oh my God, we really have a lot. Like, we don't know where the food is coming. Next food
Yeah.
is coming. We wouldn't do that. We would probably tell our kids, everything's fine. We will figure it out. Right. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but just being on the other side of the table as someone who's had to deliver some of these hard news and updates, I can totally relate to it. But I think something that one of my mentors told me years ago that has stuck with me is to always have an updated resume every 6 months, irrespective of whether I am applying, irrespective of whether the job market is extra rosy and everything is going, because there could be something happening in completely different part of the world. But given that we stay in such an interconnected world, it
Yes.
can have impact where we are living, and the markets can change just like that. And so always have. And it's also good to continue interviewing, even if not in a serious way, like what you were saying, but at least to even have a sense like, are my skills in line with what the job market is expecting? And it can be great to get those feedback and things from your peers, but at the end of the day, our peers are not hiring. So it is good to get that market check. And always have financial runway of at least 6 months under your belt so that we can maintain our mental sanity. If it is going to be something that we have to skill up, because it's hard to say, and it feels really bad, but during the times when you have the sluggish time, it is a perfect opportunity to skill up. And you're absolutely right, Carey. Like, we cannot reduce the risk because none of us are indispensable, right? We would like to think that, but none of us are. But as long as we have those skills, that's going to make us, I think, more difficult to be that person where we may be able to fit in some other things, even within the company, and may be able to help. I think those come in a long way, right? So absolutely, 100% agree. We have a question, and Ruth, so good to see you. It's amazing to see you. Ruth is one of our alumni from PM Dojo. She's done the Product Accelerator program a few cohorts back. Um, Hi, Ruth. So she's saying, thank you for talking on this topic. What were some of the signs that you could identify looking back that indicated you were going to get laid off?
Yeah. I do remember some reorgs happening. Um, and with an acquisition, that means there's redundancy sometimes, often. And so that was another thing. Um, I think honestly, those are the things that, I mean, like the numbers, And also, I think the numbers you don't see are just as important as the numbers you do see. Because sometimes you'll see like ARR, like annual, but then you won't see like profit or
Yeah.
certain things. And so I think across the board at any company, that's something you want to know. But not everybody in tech goes to business school or has been around long enough to really know what these numbers mean, like the downstream impact of them. And so knowing that too is really important, asking those questions.
Absolutely. Having friends in the customer facing role, so also looking at how many products, like how many net new sales have happened, but also how many customers are churning,
Yeah.
right? And I think just having, I think situational awareness to start getting a sense of those uncomfortable pauses during all hands meetings or things like that, where suddenly you start feeling like something's not making sense, and
Yeah.
when you start feeling that, I think it's good to start asking questions. And you don't have to go to a business school, I think, to understand. Like these days, you can Google. I remember I used to Google all of these numbers all the time because I absolutely had no idea what some of these numbers mean, but you would start getting a sense. And a lot of the times, the numbers can tell you a very different story. Even if the financial outlook is good, but it could be something where it's important to understand the runway,
Yeah.
especially in some of the smaller companies. For how much time can the company run with its financial assets before which it has to start making some of those uncomfortable decisions, right? You
Yeah.
might be also starting to get a sense that there are a lot more questions coming.
Yeah.
Right? Is this the right thing to do? Is it now that we have to do? And just some temperamental personality changes are, these are the small soft signs that you're going to start seeing. So hopefully, Ruth, that was helpful. If not, feel free to ask some more questions. And happy to, Carey and I will be happy to take that on. A question: do you think a resume writer is needed?
That's a good question. I personally haven't used one. I feel like Bosky, you probably know a lot more about this than me. I think there are definitely things you need to do to make your resume competitive and to go through the systems of an interview. But yeah, Bosky, I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Absolutely. I think this is going to depend on where you are, what you're doing, because I think everyone's career is so different. And so I need a little bit more information. But no, I don't think you always need a resume writer. You may have to update your resume, but there are so many resources available, especially on product management side, on what you need to do on your resume. But something that I have learned and something that I tell all of the folks that I mentor and everyone at PM Dojo is that there is no hacking your resume, irrespective of ATS and everything. At the end of the day, you are going to be, your resume is going to be a piece of paper that a human being is going to look at. And if it does not show distinctive skills and experiences that the hiring manager is looking for, it's not going to get passed through. The only job of a resume is to get you a conversion into an interview call. That's it. And we all know that we are way more than a resume. There's so many things that you cannot put on a resume. So I
Yeah.
think a lot more stuff is needed. It also depends on what gaps you have. So if you are starting, if you are someone, and this is something that I see a lot in PM, like folks who are coming to PM Dojo, right? They're all trying to get into product or find their next role. There are certain skills or experiences that is definitely a gap. It doesn't matter how much of hacking and cleaning up and rewriting of a resume you do. You will, if those skills and gaps cannot be addressed, then it doesn't matter how much time you're going to spend in updating a resume or even getting it professionally written. Those gaps will still exist and it will show up. If it doesn't show up in the first round, it will show up in the last round where someone tells you, you were great, but we decided to go with someone else who actually had more experience in this. So I think this is where, going back to what Carey said, right? It is really important to upskill and figure out a way to address that gap before we start spending a whole bunch of time on resume, because resume can be a black hole. Like it can be this thing where we can spend months and months and months and not make any progress. It is one small piece of the overall puzzle. Um, question for you. I'm just looking at the time. We have 5 minutes. How can you tell if a company really has certain values that they advertise, or is it something that they say? Sometimes it's like a bait and switch. Great question. Great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm still so early in my career that I think I'm still exploring that. But I think one important thing I've done in the interview process is just plainly say, like, I want to can I chat with a black woman on the team? Um, I can tell a lot from those conversations. And sometimes even just asking, can I talk to someone outside of the interview process who's on the
Yeah,
team can help
yeah,
too. And asking, how's the cult like what do you like about being at the company? And if they say I like the culture, dig into that more. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? How does that show up? And ask them, like, sometimes, and maybe Bosky, you might have a different opinion. Just say, where do you think the growth opportunities are in the culture? No place is
yeah.
perfect. I know that, but just starting to kind of dig, um, to understand. And there are platforms like Glassdoor and other sites, but I also think it's important to experience a place too and give it a shot. So, Bosky, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You don't want to
I
date
agree.
yourself before you get in there. Like,
Absolutely. No, agree with everything that you said. I like to ask these questions. I have asked these questions, and that is, give me some examples of how a particular value was actually put into practice. Because at the end of the day, I think values are great, but good companies that have very strong cultural and values will actually not only acknowledge and celebrate, but these will also be used to take action against employees who are not exhibiting those values. And I know I'm using very strong words here, but this will be to both for the good and the bad, right? Because we all know that as human beings, we are very complex creatures. And so we can have our good moments and our bad moments. And you want to work with people who are genuinely, you don't want that toxicity. So you want to also understand how is toxicity dealt with. And so that might be a question, like asking direct questions. I also ask, what is the good, bad, and ugly working here? And I ask some of these questions to every single person that I interview so that I can try to see where there are alignment and where there isn't alignment, and being very watchful, almost like a hawk, on those little non-verbal cues. And even on Zoom, you should be able to kind of catch on that. I think those are some of my things. And I also try to reach out to people, cold reach out to people who have left the company. It's very important to get their perspective on what made them leave. Not everyone is going to get back to you. Some of them may have NDAs and all of those things signed not to talk, but sometimes you can, and you might get a very different perspective. But at the end of the day, you want to make that decision and always trust your gut and instinct. If you start seeing red flags, dig in and ask more questions on that.
absolutely.
Let's kind of take a look. What are some of the any tips on positioning a resume and landing a role in a new domain, for example, B2B, B2C, moving into ed tech, health tech? I can quickly take that on, Carey. If you have tips, please feel free to jump in. I think anytime when you're trying to go into a new domain, of course, you want to bring up a lot of those transferable skills, but don't undermine any of the opportunities that you can get. Maybe you volunteered in a B2C or a B2B domain, or maybe in a new kind of a domain that you're trying to, maybe you worked on a project about, on that domain. Of course, you can always come to PM Dojo to build that experience on new domains as well. But anything that you can do to show that you are doing something to build some sort of a experience, some sort of understanding in that domain, your passion about that domain, that will help. Also, something that I always tell a lot of the people that I mentor is that anytime you're trying to switch any kind of pivot, whether it is a different role, whether it is a different domain, you want to reduce the number of jumps. So trying to keep the number of variables small. So if it is a new role and a new career choice, try to maybe keep the domain similar and maybe a different role, or maybe try to keep the role same but a different domain. Again, I'm giving, I don't know a lot of your personal situation, so I can't kind of give you very direct pointed advice, but that would be some way. Like, never forget to showcase some of those other things that you're doing that might actually be more helpful. Like, don't just rely on transferable skills because everyone else is doing the same thing and you have to stand out. Uh, seems like they're hesitant to let you talk to anyone else. That is a red flag. Absolutely. Absolutely. If they control the interview and they don't want you to talk to anyone else, that could be a red flag. And maybe it's a time to kind of start asking questions. So I think something that I've learned over the years is those PM skills of asking why questions and really being that detective. Like we need to bring that on in the interview process as well. Gary, anything to add there?
No, I think you covered it. Like you said, making also before the other question, making those small pivots. If you have an education background, going into like ed tech or something like that. And something I did early in my career was start in entrepreneurship. I did. You don't have to start a whole company, but you can do side projects. If you're interested in the ed tech space, build something small, design
Yeah.
something small, and that can show a lot. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Sri, this individual, they're saying they're an experienced B2B SaaS product manager looking for opportunities for a social cause, but the cover letter and CVs are not getting picked up as frequently as the jobs and similar background. Hopefully, my response kind of made sense. There has to be things other than CV and cover letters. So I think what Carey was talking about networking opportunities, a lot of the time as a hiring manager, what I've seen is that how we narrate our story. When I was a candidate, I was thinking my answers, my CV was great because that was the feedback I was getting from everyone around. It took me years to sit on the other side of the table as a hiring manager when I started going through 200, 300 candidates and everyone's responses sounded the same. Everyone's resume pretty much looked the same because there are so many resources on resume. We all have learned how to optimize a resume. And so at the end of the day, as a hiring manager who's spanning 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, sometimes going through hundreds and hundreds of resume, all resumes look similar. And so how do you stand out? Once you even get selected for an interview, how do we communicate that story? How are we able to package all of our previous skills and experiences in a way that we are memorable? I think come in a long way, and then addressing those gaps. It's really important. Sri, feel free to reach out. Happy to kind of give some more pointed advice on that, but I think that would be something. Recession time, lack of network can be also contributing, but there are several companies that are hiring. So even if you are part of our community, the newsletters that go out, we do have several kind of hot jobs that are published. So there are lots of companies that are hiring. We see lots of fellows from PM Dojo also getting multiple offers. So I wouldn't say that it's all about the recession time. I'm curious, how did you communicate the layoff or a gap in your resume to hiring managers and potential teammates? Carey, this is kind of, I think, the last question, if you want to take that on.
yeah, so I know LinkedIn has a feature to actually communicate that now. I didn't put it on, but just in the interview process, I would say just plainly, I got, unfortunately, like, things were going really well. I got this award. My team and I planned like our Q3 and 4. This is the impact we were expecting on our roadmap, but unfortunately, due to the economic environment, my startup had to do mass layoffs, and I was affected by one of those rounds. And I'm looking for my next opportunity. And something that I felt like worked, I don't know, maybe it does. You would know, Bosky, but I would just let him know, like, honestly, I wasn't looking before my layoff. Like, I wasn't already on the hunt. I wasn't desperate for a new job. Like, I loved my team. Things were going great. This is just a circumstantial thing, and I'm excited to get back out there and see what kind of work y'all have to offer. So,
I agree. If that is a fact, if that is indeed a fact, I think it's really important to be truthful as much as you can, right? Like,
yeah.
not like if you were someone who was looking, maybe you already were seeing the signs on the wall and you were starting to look and you happen to get the news. I think it's fair to say, but I think that's where Ruth, it's really important on how do you say it. Like I loved what Carrie did, right, in terms of how she was communicating. But if you were someone who was already looking, you can say that, hey, you know what, like it was evident that something like this will happen. I really wanted to make it work. So I kind of
Mm,
casually, I was looking at, opportunities, but yes, I was unfortunately a part of the layoff.
mm,
Um, I think one mistake I see, I've done that too, is
mhm.
over explain what happened to the
Yeah.
point where it starts sounding like I'm defending, I'm cringing, I'm moping, I am ranting. There is a very, very fine line, because I think it's a very emotional thing and a very personal thing that happens to us, right? And we start questioning a lot of things, and I think we start over explaining sometimes, and I think that's where it can be one of the pet peeves to someone that you're talking. Maybe they're maybe they had a bad day, right? Maybe they interviewed 40 people that day, and half of them were telling the smoke story. I think, everyone runs out of patience now and then, right? And so I like to kind of make sure that I am putting out a positive, I think, face and outlook when I'm interviewing, because at the end of the day, I want to show the company and the team that this is who I am. Yes, I can have bad days, but this is generally who I am most part of the day. And you know what? I'm fun, irrespective of whether I'm an introvert or not. I'm also a big introvert. But this is who I might, this is a teammate that you are meeting, a potential teammate you're meeting, and I am going to fit in right in here, and I'm going to add a lot of value, just like I also expect you to be adding a lot of value in my overall fulfillment, right? So I think that, so yeah, not over explain. I think that is something I would avoid.
That's a good point.
Awesome. Well, Carey, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you decided, in the midst of, crazy work schedule and everything, to spend some time with us and our community here, answering all of those questions and really being so open and so vulnerable and sharing, I guess, a very personal moment that had happened to you, the personal experience that happened to you, and also sharing so much of these gold nuggets with all of us. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Carey, for joining. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. If there's anything that we can help, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and our socials. And if there's anything that my team in PM Dojo can help you with, definitely feel free to reach out. With that, thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye bye.